if you guys know David at all, you know that he's a very positive person, carries himself. He always has a smile on his face, except for right now because he's a little nervous. But always has a smile on his face, really is, you know, a great leader, a great helper to those kids. They always look forward to hanging out with David. My kids, if they ever have someone that they want to pick to babysit, they're like, is David going to watch us? Like, they always want David to watch them. But a great leader, really great with kids. And so the thing is, I think sometimes when we meet someone, right, you assume you know something about them based on their character or based on, you know, just whatever stuff you've put together, which oftentimes is incorrect, right? We'll meet someone and we're like, oh, I assume I know this and this about this person. And I think that's the case. I don't know if that's going to keep happening. I don't know if it's me or you. Is it you?
Probably me.
Okay.
Sorry about
Just
that.
bumping on your shirt?
Yeah.
Okay. But I think, no, it's me.
No.
No? You moved again?
No, I did not move that time.
David, I thought we
It's not
talked
me.
about this.
It's not me.
I'm just kidding. So sorry if there's some weird sounds. I apologize. If anyone wants to make a donation for a better lapel mic, let us know. So, but David always is very positive and everything. And I think a lot of times when you meet someone like David who carries himself, especially at such a young age, the way he does, I think you can kind of assume that maybe he had like an easier upbringing, like, oh, he seems like a guy, had both parents around all the time, life put together, you know, kind of assumptions, especially, you know, when we consider in a little bit the statistics of people with your type of childhood. I think most people would never guess kind of how loaded your story really can be.
Yeah.
And so I just say that as an encouragement to everybody from the church is like, get to know people on an intimate level, right? That's what church is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be surface where everybody just kind of knows, oh yeah, that's David, he makes coffee for me, cool. That's all I need to know about David. And that's kind of the cool thing about this whole series, which is why we wanted to do it, is to like realize like there's some deep stories that people have that we miss out on. And so you might have a lot in common with David, you might find out today. You might have nothing in common at all, and you thought you had stuff in common with him. But so anyway, we're going to start early on because you're only 18.
Yeah.
So we could go year by year, almost month by month, and we'll still be fine. But in your life, right, David, so you grew up, where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I was born in La Puente, California, by Whittier.
What is La Puente like, by the way? I mean, most of us probably kind of know La Puente. It's super nice, like really wealthy area, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's the complete opposite.
Everyone was like, he must be talking about a different La Puente.
No, I was like, not in my head, like,
yeah.
no.
Okay,
It's
so what was
opposite.
it like growing up in La Puente?
Yeah, like as you can say, it's ghetto. It wasn't a good environment for if you want to raise a kid.
At least at the time. You said you've been back, and it's...
No, yeah, I've been back.
Better.
They did a lot. Like, they got parks now. I kind of want to
move
move back.
We're not trying to... They
Yeah,
might be watching in La Puente. We don't want... You know,
you're right.
we don't want to bad talk too much.
Yeah, but
it was
nice.
hood when you were growing up.
Yeah, when I was growing up, it was bad.
And what were some of the things maybe that happened in La Puente, or while you were a child, that maybe normal people would be like, that's not normal suburb life?
Uh-huh.
Like, what's some of those things?
A couple of things that was just abnormal when I was younger is when I was younger, we would play this game with a bunch of the kids. If we were like playing basketball on the street or anything, but it was called drive-by. I don't know. Every time a car would pass by, we would yell drive-by, and we would just run and hide.
It's like hide and go seek.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So I played this game also. Old childhood. I remember specifically being like, "Oh, the car's coming by! Everybody run and hide!" And someone would just yell it. And if you were like, if you didn't hide in time before the car passed, they were like, "You're out. You lost."
Yeah.
Right? I don't know about any of you guys. Anyone that grew up in the hood played drive-by when you were a kid? No? The first service was like, yeah, I remember that game. I remember that game for sure. But yeah, that's not normal. That's not a normal game for kids to play. No. So I don't encourage any kids in here today to go like pick up that game and be like, let's play this game. Don't do it. But different, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you grew up in La Puente, how was life in La Puente? Like, what was the house like that you were in? What was the home kind of situation?
So yeah, I didn't grow up as, a family of four, me and my younger brother, both parents. No, I grew up with divorced parents. Not only that, our house was rented. So we owned the house, but we had it rented for a couple families. You know, we had the biggest room for the biggest family, and then we had the garage for a couple other families. So there was always something happening around the house, such as, you know, there's just activities always happening. You know, it's never
So it was
quiet.
it was a full house.
Yeah, it was a full house.
But not with both of your parents, but it was full.
It was full,
okay.
yeah.
So your parents were divorced. Was that pretty early on?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was pretty early on. I would say when I was 1, 2 years old.
So was Dad around much at the house in La Puente when you were there?
No, he says he's been working, but I don't remember him as much when I was younger. Just mainly my mom.
Okay, so mostly raised in a lot of respects like single mother, at least in the early years.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And then your dad, you kind of started developing a relationship with your dad a little bit as you got older. And how often would you?
Yes,
kind of be with him?
since they were divorced, I would only be able to see my dad every other weekend. So
Okay.
just 3 days, and that's it.
Okay, and he was remarried already?
At that time, no, not yet. But he was
Okay.
remarried later on.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
and then you ended up getting a stepmom, your mom, and then your dad, right?
Yeah.
Now, as you grew up there in La Puente, single mom kind of environment, lots of other people in the house, you know, you seem, as I've said, like a very well-rounded individual. And I think with your lifestyle at home, it wasn't just single parenting kind of situation. What was going on behind the scenes during that time?
Yeah, as far as I can remember, there was always, you know, some stuff that wasn't abnormal. You know, there was a lot of stuff that just seemed kind of off, such as, you know, my dad not being home, my parents always arguing. So there was always moments like that I would walk in and it just wasn't, it didn't feel safe. It wasn't normal
Yeah.
for.
So it was a hostile kind of environment.
Yeah.
Just lots of fighting. Now, was church a part of your life though during that time? Like in your young
Yeah,
young
I
years?
grew up in a Christian Hispanic field over there. I went to 2 different churches at the time. One with my mom, one with my dad. Loved it. The only main reason why I loved it was because of, you know, the singing and dancing. I would, you know, partake with the other kids. That's about it.
He still has some moves too. You guys ever want some entertainment? You can look at his Instagram page. Every once in a while, you'll catch something on there. So you had very much a split life, right? It was like, this is mom's time.
Yeah.
Now it's dad's turn. Now it's mom's time. Now it's dad's turn. Like, was there, you know, I think most parents that have to juggle kids, there's like this competitive
Yeah, of course.
jealousy thing that tends to happen. And I don't think it's necessarily on purpose, but it's like, you want to be the cooler parent, right? Let's just be honest. Like, it becomes a competition. Was there some of that
Yeah, of
within
course.
your house also?
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to favoritize my father because he would, you know, let us do a lot of stuff that my mom wouldn't do, you know. He would give us a slushie, you know, 7-Eleven real quick, get candy and stuff like that.
Coke before bedtime.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah.
And the mom was just like,
Yeah.
ugh.
And yeah, when it comes to jealousy, yeah, of course there was jealousy ever since my dad remarried. My mom never liked that there was another woman in our life, so that we would call mom as well. So ever since she found that out, it was she like was tense to like, you know, let us go to my dad.
Gotcha. So there was definitely some fighting between them about a lot of stuff when you were younger. So they did take you to church. That was a big part of your life, right? Your dad took you to his church. Your mom took you to her church. So it's almost like you were living 2 lives,
Yep.
right, with 2 different people. The rules were different, obviously, when you were with
yeah.
dad than when you were with mom. Mom was a little bit more
Strict.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if everyone knows this either, because I seriously, when we were talking, I was like, do you speak Spanish? And he's really, like, it's his first language, right?
Yeah.
But he doesn't speak Spanish very often, so even though I've known you for so long, like, I knew you spoke, like, at least understood Spanish pretty well, but why don't you just speak in Spanish for your first, like, I'm just kidding. But he's, like, really, like, full Spanish speaking, and like his brother also kind of speaks Spanish, but he'll never speak Spanish.
No, yeah,
right?
It wouldn't have been his.
Yeah, but that's your mom, obviously.
Yeah.
That's her first language. She speaks to you in Spanish all the time.
Yeah, for the longest time, she would only speak Spanish
Yeah.
until she took like English school.
I actually have a video of of David and Johnny, right? And we did like this Mother's Day video for Mother's Day at the church when they were here in Little. And so what I did is I just interviewed all the little kids that were in our church at the time and asked them to say like something to their mom or like something funny about their mom. I just did like an interview on camera. And this guy and his brother were just clowning on their mom so hard. Like, I was laughing so much, but I was like, I don't know if I should put this in here. Like, is she going to be offended? They just kept, like, laughing about her English over and over.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
like, you guys are horrible, man. They were like, I was like, what's your favorite thing about your mom? And then I think you were like, when she tries to speak English. And then they both started laughing. I was like, you guys are messed up, man.
Wow.
So, anyway. It was a funny video. I was thinking about showing it. But if you go on our history, by the way, on our YouTube channel, look up like the Mother's Day thing, and you'll see
it's on there?
You'll see this guy at like
boy.
11 just making fun of his mom. So, so you gave your mom a hard time sometimes, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, single mom, just putting in work, and you and your brother just little brats.
Made it hard for her. Yeah.
So difficult. So they did take you to church, and your parents kind of tried their best, right, to shelter you from what was really happening.
Yeah.
Right? And I think this is every parent, right? We all want to shelter our kids. We want to make sure that they are kind of kept in the dark a little bit about how bad things can get in the world, right? And I think it's only natural that we want to do that as parents, to keep our kids protected. But at the same time, lots of times that protection kind of goes backwards on us, and it becomes lack of communication, it becomes lack of honesty, and then it can really leave our kids sometimes feeling in the dark, right? Where they're just like, we don't talk. We don't have conversations about real things because we just like to pretend they're not there, right? And so although they tried their best to shelter you from the things that were really going on, and they took you to church, and that was a part of your life, what was really happening that you started to realize?
Yeah. Well, like I said, they were arguing a lot at that time, but also my dad wasn't really the best role model he could have been. There for sure was, some stuff that was just not normal, that I would just, let it pass by like I didn't see it. So he was dealing with drug abuse, and he was an alcoholic too, or a lot of alcohol.
So that was going on, and at what point did you kind of maybe start noticing that, even though it wasn't talked about?
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you remember being young and...
Yeah, for sure. When I was, 5th grade going to 6th grade, those were the main years that I would, just realize that he wasn't like normal, or when he'd be drunk and pick us up sometimes, it wasn't like that. You can tell that it was different. It was different. So
did that I'm guessing also kind of made you feel even more unsafe, right? You had the unsafe feeling because of the fighting, because of all the stuff in the house, but then also knowing that stuff and not feeling safe to talk about it, right? And so I think a lot of times sheltering our kids, it's a fine line, right? Where we're like, okay, I do want to shelter them. I want them to feel safe, but we also need our kids to feel like they can actually talk and trust. Like, if I see something weird, I'm allowed to talk about it. Because you would see things with your dad, but you never, you were like, it's a don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah,
something happened, but I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
And so sheltering is good to an extent, right? Conversation is very important. Now, the thing that I love, though, and that I really want to point out about your parents is things weren't perfect at home, obviously, right? There was drug and alcohol abuse going on. Your parents were fighting a lot, and your mom was, I'm sure, struggling with trying to raise you two little hoodlums playing drive-by in the street. But with all of that going on, they still made church an important part of your life, even at a young age. And that reminds me of 2 Timothy. Paul writes to Timothy, and he writes to him, and this is what he says in verse 15 through 17. It says, "And I know how from infancy you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus." Now, a lot of parents, not just parents, but a lot of people have this mentality of church, right? Where it's like, I'll send my kid to church, but I'm not going to church because I'm not holy yet, right? Like, let me fix my addiction, then I'll go to church, right? And your dad didn't do that, right? Your dad was working at the church in a sense, right? Volunteering at the church. And what was he doing there?
He was he was the what do you call yourself? This
Worship.
yeah,
He was
worship.
part of
Yeah,
the worship
yeah,
team.
part of the worship team at his church.
And so, even though he was struggling with things, right? And I'm not saying like if you're dealing with that kind of stuff, you should be necessarily in leadership, right? But the fact that your dad still valued church and the importance of the gospel, at least in his kid's life and his own life, he was struggling with drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
But it didn't keep him from going into the doors of church, right? And I think that's something really important that everyone needs to take a note of, especially if, we all have sin, we all have struggles. Every single person has something different. Your dad's struggle was drugs and alcohol. Your mom, I'm sure, had a different struggle. I have different struggles. Everybody comes into church. Church is not for perfect people, right? But for some reason, we have this stigma in the church where it's like, you have to get ready and cleaned up for church, right? But it's the opposite. It's supposed to be the church. You come to church, you come to the Lord, and he starts to put you together, right? And that's what I really think the Lord did even in your life, right? Is you were introduced from infancy, as just like Paul wrote to Timothy. We don't know what Timothy's dad was like or what his mom was like, but we do know that he knew the scripture from a young age, and it played a huge factor into his life later. And so even though your dad was struggling, the Bible tells us the word does not return void, right? So no amount of Bible that you give your children, no matter how messed up or whatever mistakes you have going, no matter what fighting is going on in the household, right? The reality is God says, hey, my word, when it goes out, it does things, right? And so I want that to be an encouragement to anybody that may be having that feeling, maybe going through something like that in your life where you're like, no, I have to be perfect to go to church. My kids have to see me perfect to go to church. And we'll talk about that whole perfect parent thing a little bit more later. But so your dad was struggling, but church was important to your family still. Now, that was all through elementary school, and then what happened like 5th, 6th grade when you moved?
My dad got full custody of me and my brother. We moved in with him, so that's when we were brought into Cypress, Lakewood over here. And it was weird, at first because...
Just a lot of Pepsi for dinner?
Oh, well,
no,
not really.
So what was weird about it? I mean, your mom was obviously more strict.
Yeah. So
moving with your dad.
Everything was a little bit like laid back. We got to do a lot of stuff. Watch TV a lot. We didn't have a curfew like 8:30, or we would go to sleep at like 10. Sorry. So it was stuff like that.
Excuse me, I'm still fighting this. And unfortunately, I can't pull the mic away from my face when I have to cough. So, sorry about that. So all of this is going on. You move into your dad's. It's a big transition, right? To be with your mom all the time to now just being with your dad all the time. So you said for a while, when you were younger, your dad was kind of your favorite?
Yeah.
Typically because
of all that. But, I also thought of him as a big role model in my life.
Yeah. Every guy, especially when they're younger, wants to just be their dad, right? No matter how perfect or how messed up they are, that's your person. That's who you're looking at, right? And so your dad, you wanted him to be your role model.
Yeah.
You wanted him to be, this bigger than life figure. But the reality is he was really struggling in his life. And so you moved in, and of course you were excited, right? I get to go with dad now. Now I get to, stay up late, have like pancakes for breakfast, like you said. He said he would make us breakfast. Make breakfast all the time. And so you go into dad's house, and then this, of course, was your stepmom was there also, right?
Yeah, she was there.
So you moved in with both of them. And after that, you started realizing more of the problems, though.
Yeah, I would walk in, he's doing something, quickly hides and just pretend like there was nothing. I would just, like, oh yeah, you're right, Dad.
Yeah.
Very gullible but I knew what was happening.
You knew, but you pretended to be gullible, right? And so the drugs were getting worse at that time, or was it just becoming more obvious that it was a problem to you?
It was a little bit of both. It was getting a little bit worse because I would be constantly walking in on him.
Yeah.
But you were able to tell that something wasn't right. He would be yelling sometimes, yelling at my stepmom. So a lot of the time.
So the fighting got worse as the drugs kind of got worse.
Yeah.
And of course, you've shared with me that there were some scary moments for you, for sure, as a part of that, as it would be for anyone, right? Just feeling unsafe, but then getting added into a house like that, where now all of a sudden you feel like you have to be responsible, right? Now it's your job to take care of brother. It's your job to take care of things. So now, instead of the role model and the dad being in charge of the house, it quickly became like your job.
Yeah.
Right? To take care of things. So I'm going to share some statistics, and they're kind of upsetting statistics for sure as I read them, but I don't read them to bum everybody out. I read them to show you that this isn't the truth for everybody, right? But statistics, and these are in your notes as well, scriptures and all that stuff is in there for you guys to look back at, but statistics have shown consistently that children with a parent who has a substance abuse problem, either alcohol or drugs, were found to be of lower socioeconomic status, that they end up having more difficulties academically, socially, and typically have problems in family functioning when compared to other children of parents who do not have any substance abuse. These children are also more likely to have higher rates of mental and behavior disorders, and children who are exposed to a parent with substance abuse are more likely to develop substance abuse problems themselves later in their life. And so that sounds like a pretty bad rap, right? And of course, if you've looked at this much, you also know that they're more likely to go to prison. They're more likely to get put into detention facilities. It gets sadder and sadder the more that you read statistics when it comes to fatherless homes or homes with drug abuse, right?
Right.
And now this is why I like these statistics to share in comparison to you, because this was definitely your life, right? Dad wasn't around very much, and when he was, there was drug problems, and there was abuse problems. And so I think realizing that your statistics look like this, according to your upbringing, and to realize like that's not at all who you are or what you've become, should be an encouragement to anybody who thinks maybe my kids are doomed for failure. Like, I'm a single parent, they don't know their dad, or there's drug abuse around them. Like, a lot of parents, I think, even tend to write their own kids off just based on these, and they're afraid about these statistics. But praise the Lord that that's not you, right? And it's not at all. Now, I will say you were sheltered for that long period of time, right? And then you move in with your dad. You're there for 5th, 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade, and it started getting worse and worse, like you said, until all of a sudden
we wanted to make a change.
You wanted to make a change, right? So tell us about that.
Start of, like you said, it was getting worse from 6th, 7th, 8th. Then started my freshman year. We thank you to Ryan and the church over here. We shared his story, and they told us they got a great rehab facility. So we had no other choice, and we sent him to the rehab facility so he can get better. At that time, I was just entering freshman year. My younger brother was just entering middle school year. We're 2 years apart. And those are two, major years that you kind of need your dad to be a part of. I'm going into high school. He's going into middle school. So it was a struggle, understanding that we won't be seeing our dad for the next 6 months because he's dealing with his own stuff. And
then it transitioned again, right? Your dad, during that time, split with your stepmom.
Yeah.
Right? They ended up breaking up. And then your dad goes into rehab, and now mom's heavy hand comes back into the house, right? How was that a drastic change again?
It was nice to see my mom, but there was rules now. There was rules. She comes, she started taking care of me and my younger brother. Of course, my dad's out, and then broke it off with ex-stepmom now. But she came back. She worked. She worked a lot. Me and my younger brother did not make it easier for her, sadly.
In what kind of ways? Elaborate a little bit.
Like you said, we just make fun of, or we got used to my dad's
making fun of her when she would tell you something in English.
Yeah, it's just funny because since we were so used to my dad's his rules and stuff, we let that take care of how we are before. So seeing my mom coming back, we would like, oh, here we go. We got rules now. We got all this.
Yeah, so just
curfew.
giving her a hard time.
Yeah, just giving
sure.
her like the regular.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were like young teens. There was always that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brother fighting stuff
Oh,
too.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot.
So now you're with your mom again, 9th grade, and your dad is finally getting help, right? Now, as you said, there was no talking,
No.
right, about any of this at all your whole life.
Mm-mm.
And then all of a sudden in 9th grade, they're like, your dad has a problem and he's going to get help,
Yeah.
right? How was it somewhat refreshing to finally...
Yeah, I felt very relieved now that, I believe it was Uncle Doug that told me the news. Your dad's going through this. We're gonna do this. Plan A, and this is what we're gonna do. Plan B, and I was like, oh, I knew this all along, but like it felt nice to just know that I was, it was
that
right.
they were treating you like an adult a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, this is what's going on, and now, did you feel like a relief almost to like feel like you were like, now it's out there,
Yeah.
like we can talk?
No,
Still not
Yeah.
super comfortable about it.
no.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like to this day forward. Me and my younger brother haven't had like a one-to-one conversation about this yet. We just still like let it.
Just kind of tuck it under the bed every once in a while.
Yeah, like when we would visit him we're at his rehab, we would just have that like, how you doing, how's everything, they're treating you, just like that, but never like, is this affecting you? Like stuff like that. No.
Yeah. So you haven't, but I mean today, for instance, like your brother was sitting there, your dad was sitting there, and you've gotten to the point where you feel comfortable enough to be like, I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Which before 9th grade, like there's no way those
Mm-mm.
conversations would happen, right?
Yeah, no way.
And so it's great that now you have the ability to talk about it. There's a lot of healing that comes with that, right? About being able to be honest about things. And even though you haven't had a super long conversation with your brother about it, he heard you say it today.
Yeah.
It's out there, right, for you guys to talk about. Now, when we talk about your dad, like this is the thing that's also really great that I love about David and the way he looks at things. Is anybody, for the most part, in their life would go through this kind of situation and be bitter against their dad, right? Like, let's just be honest. You're going to have moments where you're like, oh, he wasn't there. I had to go into 9th grade without him. I'm angry about it. I'm frustrated about it. And we see this a lot, that people will hold that against them. They'll keep this grudge in the back of their mind forever. And just, you're supposed to be my dad, which means you're supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to never fail me. You're supposed to be the role model. And like, anytime a parent fails in any aspect of that, that's when high school kids start hating their parents, by the way. This is my job. I deal with high school kids all the time, and no matter how much you think your kid loves you, they get to a point in high school where they're like, I do not want to talk to them, right? They get bitter. Lots of them just get, like, not necessarily completely, I can't stand my parents, but what happens is, all of a sudden, they look at a parent and they're like, they're not perfect.
Yeah.
They failed me. They should have done this, and they did this, right? And a lot of times, everybody, like, teenagers are right? Like, we quickly write them off, like, oh, they have attitude. Oh, they're going through something. They're a high school kid. That's true, but it's a hard thing to realize all of a sudden in high school. Like, my parents make mistakes. They're failures, like me. They're not always the person to look up to. They're not perfect. They screw up. And so with David, even when I asked him, like, were you mad at your dad? He's like, yeah, you were mad, right?
There was some anger behind that.
Some anger, but you said I was less angry and more, what was it that you said in first service? You said the anger was more like disappointment.
Yeah, the anger was more like disappointed. There you go.
It was just feeling really disappointed. But when I asked David before we had this conversation if there were any Bible verses or anything that stood out to him, he shared Romans 7:15, which says, I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do, but I do what I hate, right? What I hate, that's what I keep doing. And I asked you why that verse stood out to you. What did you say?
I just pictured my dad, like, and before, the drug guy he would do what he hated to do, but he still, he did what he hated.
Yeah,
and
he just couldn't stop. Yeah. And so I think just the maturity of understanding, right, of you don't really hold it against him because you realize, like, he didn't want to do it.
Yeah, I understand.
Right?
Yeah, I figured that out. Like he didn't.
But he kept doing it,
Mhm.
right? And so I think sometimes it's important for us to realize also with anybody that's going through any kind of sin or struggle, right? And I'm not condoning, by the way, obviously, of just back and forth, right? But the reality is a lot of us have things in our life that we hate doing, right? Every parent has something that they hate that they do, but they do it again, right? Now, your dad's was substance abuse. For me, I don't know. Like, I get grumpy, and I'll snap every once in a while and yell about something, and then I'm immediately upset that I did it. And I'm like, why? I hate when I do that. But for some reason,
You do it.
it happens again and again, right? And so I think realizing that sin is something every individual deals with on some kind of different level. We all do things that we hate to do, right? But the maturity that comes from you realizing that as a kid is what's shocking. To be like, I don't hold it against my dad because he was doing it, but I know he hated it, right? He was still trying during all that time, right?
Yeah.
He was going to church. He was trying, but it was just,
It was
he
hard.
kept losing,
Yeah.
right? And so we all have sin, and I say this to high school kids all the time, and I'm sure I probably even said this to you, but to almost every high school kid that starts getting into it with their parents, I always tell them, and I try to tell this to everybody, because when you grow up as a pastor's kid, everyone assumes your parents are perfect, right? Like, oh, it must have been so nice. And like, then you hear that also when stuff isn't so nice, and they're like, it must be so nice to have. I'm like, oh gosh, I can't hear this anymore, right? It's not always all nice, right? And that's what I mean with the assumptions. You assume, oh, Christian parents, they have a ministry, everything's perfect. Oh, David's dad, he's in church, he's in the worship team, sweet, like comfortable life. But it's not always true, right? And so I think with parents and with teens, I always tell teens, I'm like, hey, you need to remember your parent is not perfect, right? We all want them to be perfect. We look at them from a young age like, that's my role model, that's the perfect person I'm supposed to be like. And I have to remind every high school kid, Jesus is perfect, your parents are not. Stop looking at your parents like they're a perfect role model. They're not. They fail. They make mistakes. You make mistakes. If you've ever failed your parents, you're on equal levels right here. You failed, they failed, right? But a lot of times we hold grudges of the adult sin higher than ours, right? We're like, you are the failure. But we all make mistakes, right? And so your dad finally was like, I want real help. He went to rehab. So when that happened, when he first left, he said it was really difficult. So was there a little bit of some resentment at first when he went, or were you just immediately like, my dad is finally getting help?
No, I was proud of him. Like he finally, this was for sure the biggest step that he took, and him going into that, it finally I felt glad that he's doing this because not only he's doing it for himself, but he's doing it for his family, which is just amazing.
Yeah. So it was pretty cool because when I asked you about it, when we talked about it, to prepare for this, he actually just said like, I'm proud of my dad. Like that's pretty cool, right? Because instead of thinking about, oh, he failed for so long, you're like, no, I'm proud that he fixed it. Like that's a really admirable thing from you and from him, right? Instead of holding the grudge for the past mistakes, you're like, we're not looking at those anymore. I'm proud of you now as my parent, which is really awesome. So you understood your dad loved the Lord, but he had this struggle. But then finally, in 9th grade, he got some help, right? Now, I made this mistake, so I'm not going to make it again. But there's a Pink song, right? And she takes a famous quote, of course, but it says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? I have to say it's a song because everyone, when they hear that now, they just start singing it in their head. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Do you believe that statement?
I believe it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it actually comes from the Bible. I don't know if you guys know this, not that exact statement. But Romans chapter 5, verse 3 through 5 says, but we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So even the Bible says, right, our sufferings, what doesn't kill us, makes us stronger. It produces character. And I really see that in you, is that through your life, and through your suffering, there was a lot of suffering, right? And through all of that suffering, instead of letting it beat you and fall into this statistical, nightmare, you chose to look at things differently.
Yeah.
And it produced a lot of character in you. So what are some things you think that going through that stuff influenced who you are today?
Yeah, of course, when my dad wasn't around at that time, I would have to step up to be, the man of the house. It's just my younger brother, nobody to look up to. So I would have to fill in that leadership role. And a couple things that helped me along to become like a leader in that aspect was, the Boys and Girls Club always had these programs and these clubs that you can join. And I took initiative to like join that, and I became like that built my character at that time. That was my character too. Like,
so in a lot of ways, you looked for good things to do because home didn't feel safe.
Yeah.
Right. And you've always been such a positive, uplifting person. I said this at first service also, is high school can be very frustrating, and working with high school can be very frustrating. Ask my wife. Sometimes I come home I'm like, oh, these kids this week, I don't know what, right? But it's weird because it's almost like they would have a meeting. Did you guys have meetings together to be like treat Ryan bad day?
Yeah,
but there would be days, man, where it was the week before, I was all excited, man, it was super productive. I had kids ask for prayer, we had fun playing games. It was so good. And then the following week, it would be someone turned a switch on. They're everyone, it's attitude day. Don't participate in anything, give an attitude whenever you're asked something. But I will say, I would always kind of count on David in those moments. I would read the room and just be oh, it's thick in here, man. Nobody wants to be here today. And I'd be okay, this game isn't going to go over well. And I would just go to David. I'd be hey, don't you want to play the game, David? Let's get everybody. He'd be come on, let's play the game. Why doesn't no one want to play? And I kind of would rely on you to do that more than you probably even realized.
Yeah,
Did you know I was doing that?
No.
Oh, I did it all the time. Because he just had a natural positive energy. Now the thing that trips me out is all this stuff was going on at home for a lot of those years that you were in youth group, and never once, I could literally say never one time did you come to youth group with an attitude or grumpy or mad at the world. You just came in and you were I'm ready, right? And you had to have days where you came to youth group and you were upset on your way over.
Oh, well, no, I would always want to come to youth group. Yeah, it would be.
So it was uplifting for him. Wow, it's a little plug, everybody.
No, yeah.
If your kids are upset, send them to youth group.
But the main reason why I would want is because I wouldn't want to stay home, have all that negativity coming. I would rather, find something positive that I can do. So, reason why I loved going to youth group. And the games was amazing too. Great distraction.
The games
were
yeah,
amazing. Yeah,
games
great
were great. So you said you went to Boys and Girls Club. You took leadership classes there, and then sports too were a big thing for you, right?
Yeah, basketball a lot. Yeah.
So a lot of basketball. I remember dropping you off quite a few times. I'd be "You gonna start basketball right now?" It was 10 at night.
I remember
A couple times.
Yeah, a couple times.
You're starting a game right now, and I would drop them off, and there was 6'5" college students. I was you playing with all these dudes? He was yeah, let's go play.
Let's go play.
So sports was a nice distraction, a fun way to kind of uplift your spirit when you're feeling bummed. Going to church, youth group, going to Boys and Girls Club, and having those influences in your life. So would you say that you tried to focus on those good moments in life?
Yeah.
So Philippians 4:8 tells us, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, and whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Was that kind of your, without even realizing it, was that your plan in life, was to just be I'm focusing on the positive things in my life?
Majority of it, yeah, I would want to focus on positive, but of course, the negative is so strong. Yeah. The devil is so strong. So I would, it would affect me quite some time. But feeling comfort from the Boys and Girls Club, welcoming and always, having all of us do different activities would always, be the positive of like my day.
Yeah. So I think it's an important thing for us to realize, and this was one of the main things I wanted to point out when talking to David, is that positivity, that attitude of, and like, we hear a lot in church, I don't know who came up with this, but that like positive thinking is like positive thinking, that's like what the world says, not even biblical. Just like, I'm gonna think positive. Like, I don't know where the church got that from. Like, we have a verse right here. that's not correct, right? The Bible tells us, like, truth, honorable. Like, think about these things. That's positive thinking in the Bible. But it's positive thinking not like, I'm so great, I believe in myself. But it's like, I'm going to focus on the blessings that God has given me, right? And I'll be honest, I'm one of those people, I'm not naturally like you. I'm kind of the opposite. So, like, after, bad youth group, I would just kind of go into like a tunnel of being like, dude, this is exhausting. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm doing, right? So for me to see somebody that's really positive is encouraging, right? And I think it's important for us to all realize, like, we have choices in how we decide to deal with negativity in our life. There was a lot of negativity. You could have focused on it. You could have been like, I'm miserable, I'm depressed, so I'm not going out. I'm staying in my room. I'm locking myself in here and I'm mad at the world. But instead you're like, no, I'm upset, so I want to play basketball. I'm upset, so I'm going to go to youth group. I'm upset, so I'm going to go to Boys and Girls and introduce things that are good for me into my life. And so there's a lot to be said for that. And I respect that about you for sure. So you said you believe that learning to deal with the hardships in your life really developed character.
It really did,
right?
yeah.
You said it making you more of a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny, though, because even though he was such a leader and he took leadership classes, right? What a great guy.
Great. He's
basically perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Took leadership classes, right? Was into basketball, like just a good, well-rounded kid. He was at youth group all the time. But the thing is I kind of thought maybe, like, you just didn't have a lot of friends.
Oh.
And that's because he never brought anyone to youth group with him. He brought maybe like 2 people once or something. But I came to find out through this conversation that we had that you were kind of a quiet Christian. Or I should say, like, disguised Christian almost through high school, right? So, like, a lot of people didn't know you were a Christian. Maybe how many people?
1 or 2.
1 or 2 people. His whole high school.
Yeah.
Right? 1 or 2 people were like, oh, I think he's a Christian.
Yeah.
So why was your faith quiet in high school?
That's a great question. I really don't. Yeah, I was shy. I was shy for sure.
But you weren't that shy. You were shy about your faith in particular, right?
Yeah, I was shy about my faith. It's not like
I'm not trying to bad talk him. I just like giving him a hard time. Just before people are like, oh, Ryan's so rude.
No, yeah, high school for sure. It is a cruel place. There is cruel people in high school. So, meeting all, like, I started off meeting, like, bad kids already. So, like, it was like if I would, say, oh, I go to church, I do this, they would think I'm a weirdo, Like, you
make fun of you.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
want to put myself through that. So, I would just go with the flow, unless, I would join. I mean, I did join one Christian club, but just one meeting. After that, I was like, I don't want nobody, like, to know that I'm walking in here and walking out, like, oh, what did you just do? I was like, oh, Christian club,
So your faith was quiet in school.
Yeah.
Right? But faith was a big part of your life, right? But it was just a big part of your life quietly.
Quiet.
Right? I think high school is difficult, and this is something, I didn't say this in the first one, but as an adult now, peer pressure in high school was like 300 times harder than peer pressure as an adult. Like, if you can put yourself back into the place of high school and really realize how difficult of an environment that is, a lot of people, like, write youth off, right? Like, it's too easy to just be like, oh, high school, right? I get after people often because, there'll be like a high school breakup, for instance, just say that, break up with their girlfriend and they're miserable, right? Break up with their boyfriend, miserable. Just like they were in a 20-year marriage and it just ended in divorce, right? You're like, yo, you dated him for 4 months, dude. Like, take it easy, right? But we need to remember, everybody, if you have a high school student, to be like, you're only 14. So think about the portion that person had in their life. It changes things, right? Those relationships are just as heavy as an adult relationship when you think about it that way. And lots of times we just write off youth struggles and youth suffering and youth pain as like, you're just a kid. You'll learn, right? You have so much life left. You hear things like that all the time. Like, you'll get over it, right? But the truth is like when you're that young, high school is scary.
It is.
It's hard. And so your faith was quiet. A lot of that was just peer pressure, influence, the stress of all of that. But people continue to give into that peer pressure even today, right?
Of course.
Look at adults in the workplace. How many people know you're Christian? How many people you really talk to about your faith? How many people have you prayed for when they had a bad day? How much is your faith on your sleeve in your public settings, right? A lot of Christians, even in their adulthood, nobody knows, right? And it wasn't until a certain time where all of a sudden you were like, I'm done being the quiet Christian, right? And so can you tell us how that happened?
Yeah. So second semester in my senior year, you know, it was lunchtime. Everybody was just around the table. We were just some conversations happening, and then out of nowhere, a good friend of mine just comes out of nowhere, just yells at, by any chance, is there anybody that's a Christian? Is there anybody that, you know, believes in God? And, you know, it was quiet a little bit.
And this is at the lunch.
Yeah, this is just lunch
area.
table. We had 2 packed tables. You know, we had people all around. And then she just says it. I was like, oh. And she's like, I'm in this Christian club, and there's not a lot of people, and I feel bad, so I'm trying to, like, ask people around. I was like, oh, okay, let's give this a try. I'm like, yeah, I can go. Eric's coming back with his pizza. You know, he just got from lunch. I was like, Eric, trying to go to this Christian club? He's like, yeah, sure. So that's like that one boldness of, like, it was pretty, like, it was a lot of people around, so I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay.
So she just went in like...
She just went full on, 100 miles per hour right there.
Yeah. And she was a senior too, right?
Yeah, she was a senior.
Did you knew she was a Christian before this though, or was
I did know she was a Christian, but I didn't know that she was like, you know,
like that, like a Christian.
Yeah, like that.
So this girl just went out to the table and just put it out there for everybody, right? And there's been like some really cool experiments where they show how contagious boldness is, right? They've done it at like concerts. Well, they'll put a really good band on a stage and nobody is dancing or moving, right? And they wait and they film it and they're like, we have a plotted person that's going to go to the front of the stage and start dancing by themselves, right? As soon as that person starts to dance, all of a sudden everybody wants to dance, right? They're having fun. Look at how comfortable they are. And then before you know it, the whole place is full of people having a good time dancing, right? But it takes one person that has the courage and the boldness to be like, hey, who's a Christian at the table? I'm a Christian. I go to a club, and it's empty, right? And she just went out there and threw it out there. And then what was cool is it was contagious because you then were like, oh, all right, yeah, I'm a Christian. He's like, when was this?
Second semester.
Second semester.
Yeah, going into
He took a long time. You guys see that? I just thought he was lonely because he didn't bring anybody. Where's all your friends, David? I didn't know you were just secret Christian at school the whole time. So finally, this girl is bold. She encourages you, and then that boldness then goes to who?
Eric.
To Eric. So then he's like, Eric, if you guys have seen Eric, he's the one with like the red, super curly hair, like a little like curly fro. He plays ball too. He's really good. And you guys were on the same team, right? But like you've been on the same team for a long time, but it wasn't communicated very much.
No.
So both of you guys were a little quiet. I asked, he was in first service, so I said, Eric, were you a quiet Christian too? And he went like this. But you didn't know he was a Christian, really, did you?
Not really, no.
See, so I have to get after him about that because I don't believe it. I think you guys were both quiet. But he's naturally a really quiet person. You don't have that excuse.
No.
So, so anyway, you end up telling Eric, you guys end up both going to Christian club together, and that becomes a whole new part of your senior year, right? Faith was out there. Everybody knew, like, these
Ask
dudes are
questions,
Christian.
yeah. We would like get up from lunch and they're like, we're in the middle of a conversation. We're like, oh, it's time. Where you guys all going? Oh, we're going to a Christian club. Like, they would ask us, like, what? I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you guys. We're going.
Yeah, it's cool. And then also the conversation, David came up to me one time after youth group. And by the way, I didn't know he was a quiet Christian. Like, I had no idea.
Like, I had a bunch of Christian friends?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah.
did. Not just like a bunch of Christian friends, but I just thought, like, all right, this dude, like, you're a leader all the time. So, like, you just seem like confident. I was like, I'm sure his friends know he's Christian.
Yeah, I had two different
little
school
lives.
David, and then I was living a double life. Yeah,
a little bit of a double life, right? And I think that's a lot of youth, man. I think that's something that everybody deals with. Is just it takes a lot of courage and a lot of boldness to stand up, especially in such a hostile environment like it is right now, to be a believer, to wear your faith on your sleeve like that. So David came up to me, though, after youth group one night, and he was just like, hey, my team, he was in high school basketball. I said, my team is really kind of negative and depressing, and, like, I just get sick of playing basketball because they're always complaining. They're just always mad. And he said, I want to start praying before games. So how did that end up turning out?
The next game, I knew Eric, we talked a little bit. We started getting close, and I knew that he was a Christian. I found out that he was a Christian. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a cool opportunity. We're going to start. I come up to him. I was like, hey, Eric, do you want to pray before our games? And he said, yeah. From there, went to a little corner. Try to make ourselves well known, but we went to a little corner. We just prayed it out. And ever since that, we would pray before our games. So that was during the summer of, the summer league, yeah.
Okay. So that's the other thing, too, right, is I think you don't have spiritual support if no one knows that you have a spiritual walk, right? And, like, a lot of times at work, you might be in high school, junior high, wherever you're at. If you don't talk about your faith, how do you expect to have spiritual support and have a system of faith, right?
Right.
All of a sudden, you start praying with Eric. Now you have a friend that you can rely on. You guys pray together, talk together. You go to Christian club, and you're like, okay, now I have a bigger support system. I have this person and that person, and we all know that we're believers. But it's hard to take that first step.
It is.
Right, to get there. But I encourage everybody to put your faith on your sleeve. Maybe not as hard as that girl went, I mean, I'm glad she did it like that. But sometimes, if you're like Eric, just kind of quiet, I can't picture him going to, like, a massive table of people, just be like, who's a Christian? Like, he's not that guy. But I think just being public with your faith, and, if someone has something going on, it's like, hey, can I pray for you? I'm a Christian. Like, I'm just put it out there, right? Then that person might even be like, I'm a Christian too. I definitely need prayer. And you're like, now there's a believer at work? I didn't know. Neither of us talked about it, right? And so that peer pressure. So speaking of that peer pressure that we all deal with, did you ever get into drinking or drugs or anything like that? I know obviously there was a lot of opportunities in school.
Yeah, peer pressure into that was a big part of in high school. But yeah, I never let that control me. I never drank, never done drugs, never wanted to do none of that. Didn't want to. But yeah, it was a peer pressure. Like I would get asked, and then
and you said something kind of cool. You said you and your brother have a pact together.
Yeah, we have this agreement. The reason why we don't drink or we don't smoke is because we understand that my dad went through that path. Why would we want to see that? Because he was an ugly person back then. Why would we want to become that ugly person and withstand that the substance of drugs or the alcohol? Why would we want to take apart that?
So even with your brother, there's like an accountability with both of you guys.
When it comes to that, we do talk about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So speaking of that, we'll get into a little bit and kind of close out here with talking about this, which is friendships and accountability, right? You said you made really good friends with Eric in your senior year. You guys are like kind of inseparable now. You guys are almost like, everywhere you go, it's just like both of you guys.
We work together too, so like.
Yeah. And you tried to make sure you worked together.
Oh,
we
have a lot of shifts together now.
Yeah.
They hate it.
So it tells us in Ecclesiastes that two are better than one, right? That's the encouragement in Ecclesiastes. Would you agree with that statement?
Of course.
That having support now, having another believer to walk alongside with you, to pray with you, has that been impactful for you?
Yeah, I don't. If anything that I get invited to, like it kind of sucks if I would go to like any like Christian programs by myself. But I'm fine with it now. But I would always, Eric, we gotta go to this. Like we gotta go to this. This is gonna be really cool. We're gonna meet more people like us, but yeah, like having another person, same belief, share the same stuff is pretty cool. It's pretty wild.
And so, in what kind of ways do you guys encourage each other? Obviously, you have other friends that are believers now and stuff like that, but I know you guys have become really close. So in what kind of ways do you guys build each other up?
Yeah, one thing that we do a lot is whenever somebody's feeling down or whenever somebody's going through, some obstacles in life, we for sure pray about it. Like if it's either me, starting to pray or him starting to pray, we for sure pray about it. We love worship. We worship together a lot too. Those like prayer for sure. Prayer is like the biggest thing that we do because prayer is powerful. I do agree with that. Prayer is powerful.
So, now as a college student with 2 jobs, college is difficult too in a different kind of way, right? But it's still people. It's difficult. So have you met other Christian friends since you've kind of gotten out of high school? And
yeah, I've set myself out there. I go to a couple young adult Christian clubs from other churches, and I'm like just to explore, meet more people like me, and it's been going great.
That's awesome. So, can we just thank David for being so honest and being able to come up here?
Thank you.
Your story, obviously, right? As I said, college student now. He goes to Cyprus. He actually is a little bit of an entrepreneur. He's like starting a clothing company, which is pretty cool. So that's something he's been doing. Never touched a drug, drank alcohol, never walked away from your faith. You're far from the statistical list that you were categorized in.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think your story is a powerful one. I think it shows that your past doesn't determine who you are. Your parents' past doesn't determine who you are. You're your own person. God created you unique as an individual and has plans for every single one of us, right? And I love that those statistics did not ring true for you at all. And so kind of in closing, I would love for you to kind of just share a couple more things. And that is, now you're like brave guy up here sharing your faith.
Yeah.
It's a big difference in like 1 year.
Yeah.
Right? But what are some words that you would say to parents, first of all? I just want to know, as being so recently a teenager, right? What would you say to parents to encourage them with their kids?
Yeah, of course. Only your children as well. But if you can sense that something's not right, their mood changes, they really there's something's wrong. Go up to them, talk to them. They for sure want to be taught because high school or middle school it's very dangerous now. They're getting introduced to a lot of stuff that it's crazy. So they always want to talk, even though they say no, like they don't want to talk. Deep down, they do want to talk, and I understand that. Kids or teenagers now they take a lot of outside behavior in. And I feel like if you just talk to them, become a friend, not as a parent. Of course, it's your job to be a parent, but sometimes they need a friend. So I feel like, talking to them is a big part.
Being aware, right, of what's going on and talking. Most kids just don't want to do it, but it's our job as parents, right, to dig deep when we need to and really get them to open up. And what about for kids that are new? Let's say they're 9th graders, right? What would be your encouragement to kids going into high school?
Yeah, I would pick some good friends. Don't put yourself out in the bad environment already. Situate yourself. Find friends that you think that are in the same faith as you. Share the same stuff. Don't fall for any drugs or alcohol at a young age. For sure, that's one big thing.
Yeah. All right, well, thanks again so much, David.
Yeah,
if we could just
thank you.
Thank you. So I'll say if that spoke to any of you guys, which I'm sure it did on one level or another, feel free to talk to David. He'll be here for a little while. If maybe you want prayer, maybe you can just relate to him and be like, oh man, I've been through that, and you're young, or as an adult, to just but make sure you guys let him know you appreciate it. It takes a lot to come up and just fully talk about your life like that. So we appreciate it once again. Let's close in a word of prayer, and then we'll actually close out in a song for today. And yeah, God bless you guys. Father God, we thank you so much for David. We thank you for his story and for his willingness to come up, Lord, and to just be vulnerable and share, Lord, about the things that made him who he is. Lord, we thank you for your hand over his life. Lord, I thank you, God, that even though there were struggles at a young age, Lord, that you were speaking into his life through your word, through church and through his surroundings, Lord, to build him up into the person he is today. So, Lord, I thank you, God, that your hope never disappoints, Lord, just as the scripture says, that we can trust in you, Lord, even when days seem dark, Lord, that we have you to rely on and to trust in. And so we thank you for that hope, and just pray, God, that each of us would be bold in our faith, in the workplace, in school, Lord, all ages, that we would wear our faith on our sleeve, just as David has today. So we just thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.